Okay, let's unpack this deep dive. We're looking at a whole stack of sources today. Summaries, characters, themes.
Publication history, adaptations.
hmm
It's all about a novel that, well, really foundational for English literature.
Absolutely. We're talking about Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice.
That's right.
Oh.
And our goal here is to pull out the key takeaways from all this material, understand the story, those unforgettable characters.
Right, and what it tells us about the world it came from and maybe why it still, clicks with people today after more than 200 years.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it?
It really is. So think of this as your shortcut to really getting the heart of this classic. We found some fascinating details, maybe a few surprises in these sources. Ready? Let's head into the world of Longbourn and Netherfield.
Okay, so picture early 19th century England. We're focused on the landed gentry. These are families who own land. That's their status, their income. Maybe not nobles, but definitely a distinct social class.
And right at the center is the Bennet family. They live at Longbourn.
Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. And their 5 daughters. There's Jane, who's the eldest.
Elizabeth, who's really our main viewpoint character, isn't she? We
Yeah.
see so much through her eyes.
Definitely. Then Mary, Kitty, and Lydia. And the big issue hanging over them, especially for Mrs. Bennet, is this legal thing called an entailment.
The entailment, right. So Longbourn, their home, it can only be passed down to a male relative.
Exactly. And the heir is a cousin they barely know, Mr. Collins. So if Mr. Bennet dies...
The girls could lose everything. Their home, their security, unless they marry well.
Which makes Mrs. Bennet, well, obsessed is probably the word. Finding husbands for her daughters is her sole mission.
While Mr. Bennet seems more detached,
Yeah.
hiding in his library.
Pretty much. Finding the whole situation kind of darkly funny, maybe.
Yeah.
He uses sarcasm as a shield.
And then, almost on cue, some eligible men show up.
Right. Mr. Bingley, rich, nice guy, rents the nearby Netherfield estate. He brings his sisters and, importantly, his friend.
Mr. Darcy. Even richer. And not quite as friendly initially.
Not at all. At the first local dance, Bingley is a huge hit. Everyone loves him. Darcy makes a terrible first impression.
How so?
He comes across as incredibly proud, arrogant, looks down on the local society, and crucially, he very publicly slights Elizabeth, refuses to dance with her, says she's not handsome enough to tempt him.
Ouch. And Elizabeth, being sharp and witty, she doesn't take that well.
Not at all. She overhears it, and her own pride is stung. She basically decides, okay, if he's going to be proud and prejudiced against us, I'll match him. She forms her own prejudice against him.
Meanwhile, Bingley and Jane, the beautiful, sweet eldest daughter,
They hit it off immediately. There's a definite connection growing there.
but Elizabeth finds someone else catching her eye.
Yes, Mr. Wickham. He's a militia officer stationed nearby. Very charming, very handsome.
And he seems to have a history with Darcy.
He does, and he tells Elizabeth this sob story about how Darcy supposedly cheated him out of money, denied him a position his father had promised him.
And Elizabeth, already disliking Darcy.
She totally buys it. It fits perfectly with her negative first impression. What's ironic, as the sources point out, is that while she's solidifying her dislike, Darcy is actually starting to become, well, fascinated by her. Her wit, her spirit.
Okay, so plot complication number 3. Mr. Collins arrives. The cousin.
The heir himself. He's a clergyman, works for this formidable woman, Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Who also happens to be Darcy's aunt, right?
Exactly. Small world in the landed gentry. Collins comes to Longbourn specifically intending to marry one of the Bennet girls, sort of sees it as making amends for inheriting their house.
And how is he described?
Oh, he's something else. Pompous, sycophantic, obsessed with Lady Catherine, completely lacks self-awareness, and he decides Elizabeth will be his wife.
Okay, so we have these swirling relationships. How do things develop?
Social events are key. There's a big ball at Netherfield. Bingley is charming, Jane is lovely, but the rest of the Bennet family, not so much.
Embarrassing parents and siblings moment.
Big time. Mrs. Bennet is loud and indiscreet. Mary tries to show off her mediocre musical talent. Lydia and Kitty are flirting wildly. Elizabeth is mortified. And Darcy looks utterly disgusted.
And Elizabeth has another encounter with Darcy there.
Yes, they dance, quite tensely. And she brings up Wickham, testing him. Their verbal sparring continues.
Then Mr. Collins makes his move.
He proposes to Elizabeth in a speech that's all about practicality, and Lady Catherine, not her, turns him down flat, very decisively, much to Mrs. Bennet's absolute horror.
But Collins isn't deterred for long.
Not at all. He recovers almost immediately. Within days, he proposes to Elizabeth's best friend, Charlotte Lucas.
And Charlotte accepts. Why?
Practicality. Charlotte's older, not conventionally beautiful, and sees it as her best, maybe only chance for a secure home and future. It's a pragmatic choice, though Elizabeth is really upset by it. She can't understand marrying without affection.
And then another blow for the Bennets.
Yes, Bingley suddenly packs up and leaves Netherfield for London. No explanation, just gone.
Leaving Jane heartbroken.
Completely confused and upset. And Elizabeth is furious. She is absolutely convinced Darcy and Bingley's snobbish sister Caroline talked him out of it. It just cements Darcy as the villain in her eyes.
So things are looking pretty bleak for the Bennets' romantic prospects.
At this point, yes. Jane's love life is shattered. Elizabeth has rejected one proposal and solidified her animosity towards Darcy.
Where does Elizabeth go from here?
She goes to visit Charlotte in her new home in Kent, which, conveniently...
This is right near Rosings Park, home of the terrifying Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Exactly. So we get to meet Lady Catherine properly. And she is quite something. Haughty, interfering, expects everyone to defer to her.
But Elizabeth isn't easily intimidated.
No, our sources highlight that. She's respectful of Lady Catherine's rank, but she stands her ground, speaks her mind politely. It's quite a contrast.
And who else shows up at Rosings?
Darcy, of course, visiting his aunt. So he and Elizabeth are thrown together again, much to their surprise. And despite himself, Darcy seems increasingly drawn to her.
He's fighting it, though.
Oh, yes. He's very aware of her lower social standing, her family's lack of propriety. But her intelligence and liveliness keep captivating him.
Then comes a crucial piece of information for Elizabeth.
Yes. She's talking with Darcy's cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam, who's also visiting, and he casually mentions that Darcy recently saved a friend Bingley from an imprudent marriage. He even says Darcy prides himself on it.
To Jane. He means Jane.
Elizabeth puts it together immediately, and she is incandescent with rage. This confirms her worst suspicions about Darcy's interference.
And right at that moment,
Right when she's furious with him, Darcy chooses that moment to propose to her. His first proposal.
terrible timing. And the proposal itself.
Is a disaster. He basically tells her he loves her against his better judgment, despite her inferior family and connections. It's incredibly insulting, even while declaring his love.
So Elizabeth lets him have it.
She does, rejects him forcefully, and lists her reasons, how he ruined Jane's happiness and his cruelty towards Wickham based on the story she believes.
How does Darcy react to that?
He's stunned, especially by the Wickham accusation. He leaves, but the next day, he finds her and hands her a letter.
The letter. This is a turning point, isn't it?
Absolutely massive. This letter changes everything for Elizabeth.
What does it say?
It explains the real story about Wickham. How Wickham wasn't cheated, but actually squandered the money Darcy's father left him, then tried to get more, and worst of all,
What?
tried to elope with Darcy's 15-year-old sister, Georgiana, purely to get her fortune. Darcy had to intervene to stop it.
Wow. Okay. That's very different from Wickham's story.
Completely different. And Darcy also explains his reasons for separating Bingley and Jane. He genuinely believed Jane didn't return Bingley's feelings. Her reserved nature hid them well. And he admits he was disturbed by the embarrassing behavior of Mrs. Bennet and the younger sisters at public events.
How does Elizabeth take all this?
It shakes her to the core. She doesn't want to believe it at first, but she starts re-examining Wickham's behavior, her family's actions. She realizes Wickham has been inconsistent, maybe manipulative, and she has to admit, painfully, that her family has behaved badly.
So her own judgment comes into question.
Hugely. She realizes her first impressions were wrong. Her prejudice against Darcy blinded her to Wickham's lies and Darcy's actual, if flawed, character. She starts to see Darcy might have been justified or at least understandable in his actions. It's a real moment of self-awareness and, frankly, shame for her.
Okay, so where do they go from there? Some time passes.
Yes, months later, Elizabeth is traveling with her aunt and Uncle Gardner. They're the sensible, grounded relatives, and their trip takes them near Pemberley.
Darcy's estate.
Exactly. They hear he's away, so they decide to tour the house and grounds. It's magnificent, and the housekeeper gives them the tour.
And she paints a very different picture of Darcy.
Yes. She talks about him being a kind master, a good brother, respected by everyone, not proud, just reserved, maybe.
Yeah.
This completely throws Elizabeth. It doesn't fit the man she thought she knew.
And then the unexpected happens.
Darcy comes home early. While they're still there, it's incredibly awkward.
How does he react?
This is another turning point. Instead of being cold or proud, he's surprisingly gracious. He makes an effort to be polite, Not just to Elizabeth, but to her middle-class aunt and uncle. He even introduces Elizabeth to his sister, Georgiana.
Which is a big deal.
A huge deal, a sign of real respect and wanting her to know his family. Elizabeth is stunned by this change in him. He seems humbled, softer. She starts to wonder if her feelings might be changing, too.
But just when things seem hopeful, crisis strikes.
Bang!
Okay.
News comes from Longbourn. Lydia, the youngest, wildest sister, has run off with Wickham.
Oh no. With Wickham,
Yep.
after what Elizabeth now knows.
Exactly. At first they hope it's an elopement, which is scandalous enough, but then word comes back. Wickham has no intention of marrying her. He's just run off with her.
Which
Social ruin. Absolute disaster for the entire Bennet family. No respectable man would marry any of the sisters after this. Elizabeth is devastated and also sure that this confirms all Darcy's worst opinions about her family. She thinks any chance with him is gone forever.
How is this resolved? It sounds desperate.
It is. Mr. Gardiner goes to London to try and find them. Eventually they are found, and a marriage is arranged. Wickham agrees to marry Lydia in exchange for money.
Who pays? Mr. Gardiner. Mr. Bennet.
That's what everyone assumes. But later, Lydia lets slip that Darcy was actually at the wedding. Elizabeth is confused, so she asks her Aunt Gardiner.
And the truth comes out.
Yes. Mrs. Gardiner reveals Darcy was the one who found them, he hunted them down, and he paid Wickham off, settled his huge debts, bought him a commission in the army, all to persuade him to marry Lydia and save the Bennet family's reputation. He did it all secretly for Elizabeth. His affection for her was so strong, he took on this massive burden and potential scandal himself without seeking any credit. It's proof of his changed character, his honor.
Elizabeth must have been floored.
Completely. Understanding the depth of his feelings and the sacrifices he made for her family, it changes everything again.
So, with the Lydia crisis managed, what happens next?
Bingley comes back to Netherfield, encouraged by Darcy, who now knows Jane does love him.
And he proposes to Jane.
Yes, finally. And she happily accepts. So one happy ending seems secure.
But what about Elizabeth and Darcy? They're still his aunt.
Yes. Lady Catherine de Bourgh. She hears a rumor that Darcy might propose to Elizabeth, and she is not having it.
What does she do?
She travels all the way to Longbourn, confronts Elizabeth, and demands she promise never to accept a proposal from Darcy, because Elizabeth is socially inferior, you see.
And Elizabeth's response?
She absolutely refuses. Calmly, politely, but firmly. She tells Lady Catherine she won't be intimidated and won't make any such promise. Stands up to her completely.
Does Lady Catherine take that well?
Not at all. She leaves in a fury. But ironically, her actions backfire.
How so?
She goes straight to Darcy and tells him about Elizabeth's insolence, her absolute refusal to promise she wouldn't marry him. And this actually gives Darcy hope.
Because if Elizabeth had no feelings for him, she might have just made the promise to get rid of Lady Catherine.
Exactly. Her defiance suggests her feelings might have changed since his first disastrous proposal. So encouraged by this, Darcy goes back to Longbourn.
And proposes again.
Yes, his second proposal. And this time, it's completely different. Humble, sincere, acknowledging his past arrogance.
And Elizabeth.
She accepts. She explains how her feelings change, how the letter, and especially his actions regarding Lydia, revealed his true character. They both acknowledge they were proud and prejudiced, and they've learned from it.
A true meeting of minds, finally.
Yes, and the novel wraps up showing their future. They marry and live at Pemberley. Mr. Bennet visits often, finding real companionship with Darcy. Mrs. Bennet. Well, she's still Mrs. Bennet, but happy to have rich sons-in-law.
What about the other sisters?
Jane and Bingley buy an estate near Pemberley. Kitty, removed from Lydia's bad influence and spending time with her older sisters, improves greatly. Mary becomes a bit more social. Lydia and Wickham.
Let me guess. Still scraping by.
Pretty much. Always needing money, moving around. Darcy still helps them out occasionally for Elizabeth's sake. Georgiana and Elizabeth become very close. Even Lady Catherine eventually comes around, sort of. And the Gardiners remain dear friends to the Darcys.
So it really ties everything up. It shows that journey of overcoming those initial flaws.
Pride and Prejudice, yeah, for both of them. Shaped by their families, society, everything. But they get there.
Okay, let's take a step back and look at those characters and themes again. Elizabeth's journey is really central, isn't it? From being so sure of her judgments.
Absolutely. So sure, and quite proud of her perception, actually, to realizing she was totally wrong, humbling herself, and learning to see past surfaces.
And Darcy's arc is just as significant. From that initial, almost offensive pride and class snobbery.
To genuine humility. We
Sure.
see it in how he treats the Gardiners, how he handles the Lydia situation, his second proposal. He truly changes.
The impact of parenting really comes through too, doesn't it? The contrast between the Bennets and how Darcy was raised.
Oh, definitely. The sources really point this out. Mrs. Bennet's silliness and focus only on marriage, Mr. Bennet's withdrawal. It directly contributes to Lydia's behavior, whereas Darcy, despite his flaws, clearly had principles instilled in him.
And you see that environmental effect even with Kitty improving away from Lydia.
Exactly. Then you have Jane, all sweetness, maybe too unwilling to see bad in people. Bingley, good-hearted but easily led.
Wickham, the charming villain.
The classic wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
And Collins just perfectly captures that pompous absurdity. Lady Catherine represents the entitled arrogance of the aristocracy.
Well, the Gardners are like the sensible guides.
Yes, level-headed, kind, practical. They offer crucial support and perspective.
And the title Pride and Prejudice, it's not just about them having those flaws, but about overcoming them.
Yeah, precisely. It's the core theme. Both characters embody both traits at different times and have to work through them. The sources mention some debate about where Austen got the title, maybe from another novel, Cecilia, or maybe just because it sounded good after Sense and Sensibility.
But it fits perfectly.
It really does.
And how Austen tells the story, that free indirect speech technique, is so important, isn't it? Getting inside Elizabeth's head.
It's key. We experience the story largely through her perspective, so when she misjudges Darcy, we misjudge Darcy alongside her. We share her prejudices initially.
Which makes her learning curve feel like our own journey.
Exactly. It makes the realization, oh, I was wrong too, much more powerful for the reader. It's a masterful technique.
So let's talk about the journey of the book itself. Its legacy. It wasn't initially Pride and Prejudice.
No, it started as first impressions. Austen wrote it quite young, back in 1796-97. Her father even tried to get it published then, but no luck. It was rejected.
But she came back to it later.
Yes, revised it significantly around 1811-1812, renamed it, and sold the copyright for £110, which seems tiny now.
Especially considering how well it did. The publisher apparently made quite a bit more.
Oh, yeah. It was published in January 1813 and was an immediate hit. Sold out within the year, needed a second edition, then a third.
And it traveled quickly. Translations started appearing.
Remarkably fast. French, the same year, 1813, then German, Danish, Swedish. The first U.S. edition was in 1832. It found an international audience very early on. The Chapman edition from 1923 became the sort of standard scholarly text later on.
What was the initial critical reaction like?
Generally positive. Some called it the fashionable novel. People liked its realism, its characters, but not universal acclaim. Charlotte Bronte famously found it a bit too confined, like a carefully fenced garden lacking grand passions or wild landscapes.
Interesting critique. But fast forward to today. Its popularity is undeniable.
Oh, absolutely massive. Constantly ranks near the top in best-loved books polls. BBC's Big Read had it at number 2. An Australian poll put it at number 1. Estimated sales are around 20 million copies globally.
20 million? For a book from 1813, that's incredible.
It really speaks to its enduring appeal.
And that appeal has led to, well, countless adaptations.
An absolute explosion of them. You have the big screen movies, the classic 1941 with Olivier, the 2005 one with Keira Knightley.
And the TV versions. The BBC seems to love it.
They do. The 1980 version and, of course, the 1995 miniseries with Jennifer Eel and Colin Firth. That one was huge. Really cemented Darcy's image for a whole generation. Colin Firth in that white shirt.
Became iconic. And it's not just films and TV dramas.
Not by a long shot. Stage plays, musicals, even opera, I think.
But it goes way beyond faithful period adaptations, too.
Oh.
That's what's really wild.
Totally. Think Bride and Prejudice, the Bollywood version. Or I Love You Because, a New York musical that swaps the genders. There's even a Japanese manga, Hana Yori Dango, which takes the core premise of a poor girl and a rich, proud guy in a high school setting.
An Israeli TV show set it in Galilee. A Red Dwarf episode visited Pride and Prejudice world.
Right. And there was that proposed movie, Pride and Predator, with aliens landing near Longbourn.
Seriously, that sounds amazing. Did it get made?
Sadly, no, I don't think so. But the fact someone even conceived it shows how far people are willing to stretch the concept.
And then there's the whole world of literary spin-offs. Books continuing the story or telling it from Darcy's perspective.
Loads of those. And modern retellings. The absolute giant, there has to be Bridget Jones's Diary.
Ah, yes. The connection is so direct.
It's explicit. Helen Fielding deliberately used Pride and Prejudice as the template. You've got Bridget, unlucky in love, Daniel Cleaver as the charming but unreliable Wickham figure, and Mark Darcy.
Played by Colin Firth, no less.
bringing it full circle. The serious, initially judgmental man who turns out to be the good guy. Even Bridget overhearing Mark Darcy insult her at a party directly mirrors Darcy's first slight against Elizabeth. It's a brilliant update.
And we can't forget the genre mashups.
Pride and Prejudice and zombies. Taking the original text and just adding zombies and martial arts.
Which somehow worked. It became a bestseller, even got a movie.
It did. And a prequel novel about Elizabeth training as a zombie killer. Marvel Comics even did a fairly faithful adaptation. The sheer variety is just staggering.
It really is. So wrapping this up, what does this whole deep dive tell us? It seems Pride and Prejudice is more than just a historical novel.
Absolutely. It shows how a story rooted in very specific early 19th century English social rules can explore themes like judging others, the influence of family, finding love against the odds that still hit home today. Austen's genius was creating characters and dynamics that feel timeless.
And here's maybe the really interesting thing to chew on. Looking at all those adaptations, the
Right.
faithful ones, the Bollywood musicals, the zombie versions, Bridget Jones.
The sheer volume and wild variety of them.
What does that tell us about our relationship with these classic stories?
Mm-hmm.
To the fact that Pride and Prejudice can be endlessly twisted, retold, reimagined for different times and genres?
Yeah.
That what makes it a classic? Is it adaptability the key?
That's a fascinating question, isn't it? Can a story only truly endure if its core is strong enough to survive, even thrive, through constant reinterpretation?
Something for you to think about.
Yeah.
Maybe as you pick up the book again, or watch one of those many adaptations, or explore more of Austen's world.